Okay, good afternoon. We'll hold on just a minute to allow people to come in. Just taking a look at these new polls. It's going to be very interesting tomorrow. Okay, so good afternoon. I'm Steve Mazzacane. This is the Steve Mazzacane podcast. We'll be talking today about the presidential race. Obviously, tomorrow is voting day. It was interesting to get some numbers in Brantford, and it looks like other towns are kind of mirroring those same numbers on early turnout. But before we get to that, our sponsor today is By the Sea Day Spa. Those that know it, it's in Brantford, one of the largest and best, but not even close, on the shoreline. And so we'll be talking a little bit more tomorrow about their new monthly, it's not new, but they've redone their monthly program. During this time, it might be a really good idea to take some time during the week after this election and go relax a little bit. And so following all the safety protocols, they're, our sponsor today, we're happy to have them. So we'll talk more about them tomorrow because tomorrow there's not a ton of stuff to talk about. There's an election going on. I have found in my past in covering elections, election day is the slowest day. There's nothing to cover anymore. We're done. It's just a matter of some pictures of who walked into the polls and call it a day, and that's news. So in general, it should be a light day tomorrow. We could talk more politics and more local business stuff tomorrow. But we'll talk primarily about the presidential race, what I see, what the polls show us, what I think may happen. I will tell you that, 4 years ago, it was just easier to predict this because there were less factors. We knew Hillary's unlikables were high. And I always looked at it this way, and I wrote this many times, that, 8 years earlier, Barack Obama, a guy who, with a Muslim-sounding name, in the midst of war on terror in the Middle East and all these other issues, came out of nowhere when Hillary was the huge favorite and beat her soundly among Democrats to get the nomination. Logic would tell you do not put her up again. Logic did not work. And so she beat Bernie Sanders, left some of the Democratic Party upset. Maybe didn't show up to vote. The younger kids didn't show up to vote. We don't know for sure, but some of the numbers are showing us that. And Hillary was beaten. It looked like a month out. I wrote the article about 6 weeks before that Trump was going to win. I was derided for it, but the numbers just added up. And there's one overwhelming fact about Trump. People like him. No matter what the numbers say, it could be a love to hate thing, or they just like him. But either way, they tune into the guy, they're entertained by the guy, and they listen to the guy. That's just a fact. And we have that. It's been decades now that he has been front page news constantly, #1 TV shows, and for Christ's sake, in kids' movies. And so when somebody is put into a kids' movie, the amount of research that goes into it by people to make sure he's likable and will he pass the screen test and all this other stuff is huge. People like Donald Trump. There are people, and by the way, Democrats liked Donald Trump. Hillary was at his wedding. He was fundraising for every Democrat known to man before that. So this sudden hatred is part of politics and less about the type of person that he is. That said, that's what's making these polls so difficult. Biden doesn't have the unlikable numbers that Hillary had. He's more of the safe choice. I think the Democrats, again, have gone with a retread. They didn't learn their lesson. They're losing elections running the same names over and over again. When someone comes out of nowhere like Barack Obama, they win. But they run the same names again, Biden and Hillary. Biden's been rejected multiple times by the Democratic Party. So this race has nothing to do with Biden. If you talk to a lot of Republicans, they'll say to you, tell me why you're voting for Biden without mentioning Trump. And there's no reason. I don't see anything that says, oh my God, I love Joe Biden. I don't see it. I see, oh my God, I hate Trump. Oh my God, he tweets crazy stuff. Oh my God, he's sexist. Oh my God, he's racist. And part of the problem Democrats have is that many of those doomsday scenarios that they talked about, the world's coming to an end and Mexicans are going to get deported, and we're going to be in nuclear war with North Korea. Those things haven't taken place. So the question is, are there people who either voted for Hillary last time or didn't vote who will now go vote for Trump? I don't know the answer to that. That will determine the election. If the answer is no, like I can't see a Hillary voter down saying, okay, I'll give Trump a chance now. He's been there for 4 years. It's not as bad as we thought. Let's go back to him. I could see people who didn't vote at all now saying, all right, I'll go to Trump. Is it enough to put you over the top? And that's the question we have. If the turnout is increased, and it looks like it will be, where are those new voters going to, especially in those swing states? So let's do like we always do, or we've done for the last couple of weeks, and we go to Real Clear Politics. We start with, if you go on the Real Clear Politics page, upper right-hand corner, I'm looking at battleground states. But overall, the trend has changed. If we even look at the general election, which doesn't mean much, it's down to 6.8. If we click on that, the general election, according to this, was 10 points June 24th. It was 10.3 points October 11th. The margin between Biden and Trump was 10.3 points October 11th, and now it is 6.8. So that brings us one significant question. Momentum is clearly going in Trump's favor. Races tend to get closer. The question is, does Trump have enough time? Can he make up that full difference? And with the added aspect of so many people voting early and so many ballots already in, those late breakers is not going to be the same number. So that's a significant problem for Trump. And this is what makes this election so hard to call. Now let's go back to the main page and look at what only matters is really 6 states. And these states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Florida, and Arizona. So if you're doing this along with me, let's see here. You have 6 states here. Now, Clinton, in the final averages 4 years ago, in these pollings in these 6 states, led by 1.1 points going in. Trump won cumulatively by 1.7. So the polls were off in swing states in a cumulative, by putting them all together. I'm having a hard time saying that word, cumulative, 2.8 points. So if we take 2.8 points, and no, the polls were off 4 years ago, 2.8 points. If we look at the current polls and say which polls, again, kind of aggregated here, but where would he win if he's within that margin of 2.8 points? Florida, Biden leads 1.7. That means 1.7 is less than 2.8. Trump would win. North Carolina, Trump aggregated now is up 0.5 point. Pennsylvania, Trump up 2.9. 1/10 of a point between the difference last 4 years ago in that poll. Michigan, Biden 5.1, so Biden wins that. Wisconsin, Biden 6.6. Arizona, Biden 0.5. Where does this come down to? 1 state. If the polls are off the same as they were 4 years ago, it comes down to Pennsylvania. And Biden currently leads, according to Real Clear Politics, aggregated polls by 2.9 points. Trump beat the polls last time by 2.8 points. That's how close this race could be. The problem is we run this risk. It could be a blowout. Biden could just wipe the floor with him. Or the polls are ridiculously off and Trump has gotten momentum early and just gone crazy. But I will say this. Based on early voting, based on, I don't know what your, Tracy Jacobson, you said nope. I'm not sure what you said nope to. I'm sorry. Jack, you showed, so Jack in our comments is showing a poll from the Trafalgar group, which last time predicted Trump would win, and they were right. And they have not always been the most respected polls, but they were accurate 4 years ago. Actually, Jack, I'm glad you pointed this. Arizona, he has Trump winning. Ohio, So basically, they have Trump winning the election, which October 25th, that's Wisconsin. Okay. Pennsylvania's everything. And election night, we may not know where Florida is or North Carolina or certainly Pennsylvania, but that is where it's going to come down to. All the momentum right now is with Trump. The question is going to be, does he have enough time? And let's make this amazingly clear. The polls that we saw online after the final debate, the second debate, all said Biden won. I didn't see it that way. I thought Trump was superb in that debate because the bar for Trump was, can you keep yourself composed and speak in an intelligent manner? And he did. In that debate, he looked, okay, not Obama level presidential, but he looked far more presidential than people had seen him before, certainly in that first debate. Also in that debate, Biden made a huge gaffe when he came to fracking. And it's odd with fracking because Obama was the president that got America energy independent by allowing fracking, by fighting the Democrats on fracking. They certainly didn't want it. In any event, that mistake was made. Trump looked more presidential in that debate. I believe Trump won that debate. Had Trump come out in that first debate with that performance, this race would be over. The problem with early voting is a lot of those early votes never saw that final debate. Those votes were in by that final debate. So the late breakers that Trump dominated 4 years ago are going to be less. People vote when they're emotional. And people who saw that debate, it was a debacle in every sense of the word, that first debate. And that was on Trump. And the fact that he came out that way was so ridiculous in that debate. A lot of the ballots that you see winning after that day and before the final debate, they're all heavy Biden votes. And it's interesting. I posted on our Facebook page earlier. I'm going to pull it up now. On just Brantford's example of what's happening with absentee votes. So obviously there's a huge push by Democrats to vote early. Let's take a look at this. Total number of early ballots cast so far in Brantford, 7,256. That's out of about 21 or 22,000 total ballots, registered voters, I'm sorry. Requested were 7,955, so we may still get another 700 in. I was at town hall today. There are people that can go in today and get a ballot. Democrats returned 3,400 already, which is basically half of their 7,600. So half the Democrats in town have already voted. Election day is going to be dominated by Republicans. But let's see, what does this do, early voting, to down ticket races? So let's look at the 102nd district, right? So we have Robin Comey against Mark Riccio. Robin Comey is a Democrat. Riccio is a Republican. There is a 2-to-1 registration advantage, Democrat to Republican in Brantford. The largest voting block by far is unaffiliated voters. To win a race, if all the Democrats go party line and vote for Robin Comey, no Democrats are voting for Riccio, I can tell you that. Maybe some people that know him personally or something, but in general, that's not happening. He does not have cross appeal. So Comey locks up the Democrats. Riccio locks up most of the Republicans. In order to win, Riccio's got to make up a couple thousand votes in unaffiliated voters. But here's what's interesting. Unaffiliated voters returned 2,846 ballots already. They're at about 28%, 29% of their vote total is already in. And if those people voted early after that first debate and their vote's in, they're probably party line voters. One of the advantages you're going to see with early voting, in my opinion, is that you're going to see people vote down ticket more often. When you're sitting at your kitchen table, the ballot's in front of you, you see the names. If you walk into a voting booth on election day, you care about the president, you check it off, you put it in, and you walk out. When that vote sits in front of you, that ballot sits in front of you, you're more likely to look down ticket. If you're a Biden voter, as most of those early voters were, you were likely voting down ticket. I can't see anybody who saw that first debate and said, oh man, I can't wait to vote for Trump. Even Republicans were like, oh shit, that was rough. So there is going to be this huge locked Democratic vote already in. It's funny because the get out the vote effort, which is almost always a Democratic strong point, has to be the Republican strong point. The votes from that final debate to election day will skew Republican, will skew Trump. And the question is going to be is what is the turnout in that group? And it's going to be it's just a fascinating race overall going forward. Kathy, unfortunately, I don't always see the comments as they come in because I'm looking at other screens, so I'm not sure what you're referring to. But the issue is going to be, do I think Trump, if the election happened a week from tomorrow, Trump wins. I don't question that. I think he would take a large number of the late breakers, and I think there'd be enough in those swing states to put him over. But the election is tomorrow. And Trump may have cost him the election with that first debate. Now, there's a chance early voting was 80% Democrats tomorrow. All the unaffiliated went Democrat, and we wake up, or we get to 8 o'clock, and by 8:15, North Carolina's called, and Pennsylvania's called, and Florida's called, and it's over. That's all there is to it. If Pennsylvania or Florida is called, it's nearly impossible for Trump to win, and then just close the door, which for the betterment of the country is probably a good thing. If Florida and Pennsylvania go down to recounts and hanging chads and all that stuff, for the better of our country, I think we're going to suffer. It'll be rough. I think the last thing we need is another month of legal battles and nonsense to take place. I think Trump today actually mentioned that he would, or alluded to the fact, or alluded to the idea of firing Fauci, which is pretty much the dumbest thing he could have said. It's amazing. I look at things from a political standpoint and what the advisors behind him might be saying. What is the strategy behind him? And there's a strategist saying, don't say these stupid things. Just stay on point. Just stay on point here. Don't say, I would fire Fauci. If you're one of those swing states that cares about COVID, where the numbers are going up like Wisconsin, you're like, what? And remember, the people left to vote are his base. It's the Republicans who haven't filed absentee ballots. They're the people who are going to show up and vote. 75% of the people who are going to vote tomorrow are voting Trump. So people have asked, why am I not? And I have defended Trump on this podcast. There are some reasons that I am voting Biden. And I'll explain that. One is, I don't have a problem with the rhetoric. I understand why people voted for Trump. I understand this concept of the system is so broken, we need somebody that's from outside who has the strength to walk in and just shatter it. To a large extent, Trump has done that. But part of that craziness, part of the nonstop tweeting, part of the nonstop statements is when you use a bully pulpit, there are consequences. And it's not just consequences in America. So, this is what foreign policy comes in and the way we treat other countries. America first was this concept that says America is leading the country and we are the head of the world. In many ways, we are. The military, we absolutely are. We're not the fastest growing by far. That's happening everywhere. But that follows a president who looked at the world as one big world and that we're a part of it, not necessarily in a leader, but not necessarily a dominant force. That's the way the world works. We are an international, our trade is international, economics is international, everything we do is the world. And that affects us every day. When he tweets about a company, it affects that company, it affects investors, it affects 401ks, it affects foreign policy every single time. We have foreign investors in these companies. Some are owned by foreign investors. Most presidents, people with political background, understand that when you say something publicly as a president, it has enormous weight. And you have to take that seriously. The fact that someone can pick up his phone and tweet something that moves markets, changes lives, destroys companies, plan, and they are willing to subsidize industries to take over the world. We have to fight them. Trump is absolutely right on fighting them. The problem is there's no plan. What's the strategy? When I take on a marketing contract for a company, we sit down and we come out with an overall plan, a strategy. This is international trade with two of the biggest powers on the planet, not just militarily, economically. America's companies are very much intertwined with Chinese companies. Chinese investors are very much intertwined with American companies. So you can say we're going to war with you, but there's no significant advantage. Trump is good when he has the advantage of being the bully. That's a business strategy. People say that bully is a terrible word. Yes, bullying is, but from a business perspective, that's how we got here. That's a business strategy. You can kill a small company by locking them up in court. You can destroy them economically. There's a bunch of things you can do. That's a business, right or wrong, ethical or not. That's how we got there. But you can't do that with China. So you jump into this war without a clear plan. And the third thing the biggest issue I have with Trump is he has accomplished some things. I look at the Middle East, there's no question. He has accomplished some executive order things that have been successful. I don't believe he's as racist as people say. I have no problem with the border wall. We're not having a mass immigration problem. In fact, we're not even talking about immigration this election season, which tells you the Democrats realized that wasn't a winning strategy. But at the end of the day, Trump gets in and passes a major tax cut. All of the things he got done via executive order. He never really got it done through Congress. There is one spectacularly huge, successful program that could have easily have gotten through Congress that he chose never to do. That if instead of a tax cut, he had taken that money and put forward an infrastructure bill and improved this country's transportation, our highways, so many other aspects of it, that would have been a 10 times better use of the money and a much, much bigger boost of the economy. This idea of tax cuts is this dream of every time there's a tax cut, it'll boost the economy. It's not true. Taxes can be too high. Taxes can be a burden to business, no question, burden to people. They could impact decisions made and investments made. But giving money back with a national deficit when times are good is bad economic policy. When times are good is when you save. When times are good is when you pay down the deficit. You don't say, let me get less revenue in. And if you're going to spend more money, spend it on an investment in the country that you easily could have had bipartisan support for. Everyone would have supported a bipartisan infrastructure bill. So he had an easy decision to make. Do I appease my base who are yelling about tax cuts? Or do I create real value, create a ton of jobs, and improve our country's infrastructure on a bipartisan basis? He chose not to. That's why I can't vote for him. Do I see a savior in Biden? No. Do I think Biden brings anything overly presidential to the table? Not really. Can Kamala Harris be better? I don't know. But we're making a huge trade war with China with no end in sight, no real plan. At any time, this guy can pick up his cell phone and tweet things that moves billions of dollars in markets, seemingly without caring. And not just American markets, international markets. And when you had an opportunity to have real bipartisan support for an infrastructure bill, where you could have really invested in your own country, and you said, no, I'd rather give a tax break, that helped all classes. I don't buy into it's only the rich people, but the rich people benefit the most. But you know, that would have done the same effect, if not more, for the stock market. You know what Caterpillar's stock price would have done? All the infrastructure-related stocks would have done? They would have skyrocketed. I don't blame him for COVID. I don't look at COVID as a disaster. We knew COVID, it's a pandemic, people are going to die. And you know what? And I could look at Democrats and say they're ridiculous right now because they're going after Trump. Oh, you're not acting fast enough. Today, Lamont, with the numbers going to 6% positive rate, says, no, it's not a good time to close schools and not a good time to shut down. So let's stop pretending that Trump should have shut the country down earlier and all that nonsense, because Lamont's not either. I don't blame him for those things. The standard attacks the Democrats are throwing at him don't make sense. But there were some easy things on the table. Stop tweeting and moving markets. That's international. That impacts international trade. Stop with the tax cuts to appease your base and come up with an infrastructure bill that appeases everyone. That just makes sense. And having a China trade war that has no end in sight, that's why I'm voting for Biden. Fred, I'll read a comment that's in U.S. is the largest economy in the world. It's 3 times the size of China. Look what happened. China is growing extremely fast. Their middle class is growing extremely fast. Look what happened to the Middle East oil when America became oil independent. Prices were reduced from $5 a gallon to $2 a gallon. Yeah, and thank you, Barack Obama. Listen, when Barack Obama got in office, the Democrats thought he would ban fracking. That's what he wanted them to do. There are 2 things that I am incredibly proud of Barack Obama. Obama's a great president, but 2 things. One, the left wanted him to go after Bush and Cheney for war crimes, and he goes, no, we're putting the past behind us. Because they were guilty of war crimes. And 2, the left wanted him to get rid of fracking. Period. And he wouldn't do it. And we're not talking about energy independence now because of what happened during Obama's time. Not true. Trump proposed an infrastructure plan on February 2018, $200 billion in federal funds and $1.5 trillion from the private sector. Explain that. Go ahead. Explain that to me. Because I remember that bill. It was comical. That's not an infrastructure. $200 billion in federal funds and $1.5 trillion from the private sector. Give me a break. What, was Amazon going to start paying for highways? Where was that coming from? No, he did not put forth any bill for infrastructure that made sense. And it has to be 2 things. You can't give up tax cuts and then go to pay this. I do think Pelosi would have been receptive on infrastructure. Infrastructure was the one thing everybody wanted. Here's what happens in an infrastructure bill. If it's being proposed, I know we can use Brantford as a great example. Here's what would have happened. If a real infrastructure bill was proposed, half of Brantford would have wrote letters to not just Pelosi, but Chris Murphy and Blumenthal to get Exit 53 redone. Right? We need $50 million or so to redo Exit 53. And every single congressman and every single senator, Democrat or Republican, would be getting those letters on projects in their neighborhood. Remember the shovel-ready words that we used under Obama? So had anything logical have been proposed, the pressure from every single state would have been huge to pass an infrastructure bill. So they would have had to have come up with something. So instead of a tax cut, you pass an infrastructure bill. It's a massive stimulus to the economy, and it provides lasting benefits to the country. At the same time, you have the same effect as your tax cut. Your stocks go up. All the stocks related to infrastructure go up. Concrete suppliers, labor unions do phenomenal. Caterpillar, construction equipment, all does phenomenal. Iron, steel does phenomenal. So you had a much better option on the table, and it wasn't taken. And there was a ton of support for infrastructure. But the party line keeps yelling tax cuts, tax cuts. First of all, why would you cut taxes with a deficit? That's like saying, okay, I work 40 hours a week and I have credit card debt. I'm starting to pay down that credit card debt. We have a lot of money coming in. Oh, wait, let's only work 30 hours now and not worry about the credit card debt. Like, there's nothing fiscally conservative about that. What's fiscally conservative about when money's coming in, instead of saving or paying down debt, saying, hey, let's not have money coming in? That's not fiscally conservative. That's stupid. And if you're going to take money off the table, at least make it an investment in infrastructure. Something that makes sense. So in short, I'm not buying into the Democratic attack. The Democratic attacks are 5 or 6 operatives in a room that say, what do we think will be successful? Let's focus on that. You're not hearing about immigration. I haven't heard anything about immigration from the Democrats this election because it's a losing argument. People in general kind of agreed, let's have a wall. Let's not have illegal people coming in. So that was a losing argument. What do they think was a winning argument? COVID. Do I think so? Not really. If COVID was a winning argument, Biden would be up by 20 points. Period. But I will tell you this. I enjoyed my tax cut revenue by growth rather than taxation. Revenue by infrastructure spending would have helped too. And if you were invested in any 401k, it would have gone way up. Period. That's how it works. Now, if you suddenly find out the government has a contract with Caterpillar for more equipment, or with a concrete company for more concrete or for more whatever, those stocks skyrocket. And you have a lasting benefit. You have bridges that need to be fixed. You have exit ramps that need to be put in. We have real problems that need to be solved that now just another 4 years haven't been solved. But I don't agree with the Democrats' strategy. A lot of the claims are false. There's a lot of things Trump did that are good. I don't abide by this thing that he's just an evil person. He's done a bunch of bad things. A lot are good. There are bills that made a lot of sense, or executive orders that made sense. He was not able to work with anybody. Granted, Pelosi would have said no to most. I think she would have said yes to an infrastructure bill. And then what's the plan on China? That's true, Kathy. Instant gratification is true. Remember the George Bush one? The George Bush actually sent you a check with your rebate. Remember Dan Malloy proposed, what was it, $57? He wanted to send everybody a check for $57. Imagine that. Our state, it's just as stupid there. Our state, with all the deficits we have, instead of saving and building up more, let's give people a $57 check. How dumb that is. It's not dumb if it's a Republican. It's dumb if it's anybody. Okay, if we have no debt and we're sitting on a massive, $5 trillion in savings, and we're in phenomenal fiscal shape, all right, let's do a tax cut. All right, maybe. Honda, but does your average American respond to a tax cut more readily? I'm not sure what you mean. I think the people who have high 401ks got help. At the same time, what happens with an infrastructure bill? Your unions have jobs for years, right? The 401ks skyrocket because money that people invested in those standard American companies do great. So either way, those corporations in your 401k is going to go up because of a tax cut. Their corporate benefit profits are higher, or they have infrastructure money, so they're working, and their corporate profits are higher. I'd rather have corporate profits be higher when more people are working. That just makes sense. It doesn't just have to be a line item on a tax form. So, in short, that's why I'm voting for Biden. It is not, as most Republicans point out, because I have a love of Biden. I don't see any love of Biden. I just don't see it. But the idea that this guy can get up at 2 a.m. and pick up his phone, I have CVS stock. If he writes a thing saying we're never going to, the company will not do our vaccine through CVS, my stock will cut in half. And this guy can do stuff like that. That's not presidential. That's not smart. That's not good domestic policy or foreign policy. Usually presidents understand that the bully pulpit has significant power. You can move markets, you can impact lives like that. And this guy tweets 1,000 times a day. He goes on rants on Twitter. That's not presidential behavior. And there's lives on the other end of that. There's people who are impacted on the other end of that. I'm referring to instant gratification. Your argument makes sense as presented, but not in reality. Well, it made sense in reality with the stimulus bill under Obama. It was a huge, huge boost to the economy. But even if you didn't believe in an infrastructure bill, even if you didn't, no infrastructure bill, when you have the deficits that the United States is in, did a tax cut make sense? Does it? You rather pay more in interest on the deficit that you have, that we in many cases pay to China, but in other places as well, as opposed to taking that revenue and paying down debt, or we're going to give a tax cut. Tell me what's fiscally conservative. Not having debt, not paying an interest rate on debt, or giving a tax cut and increasing the debt. What is more fiscally conservative? Forget Republican or Democrat for a second. What makes good fiscal sense? It's not a tax cut. It was just as dumb when Malloy wanted to do it. I'm not saying taxes should be higher. But when you have good times, when your household has more money coming in, when your business has more money coming in, you save it. You pay down debt. You get an infrastructure bill together. Richard, our infrastructure is a disaster. You go to any of those other cities around the world and see what they have done. It's unbelievable. And our stuff is old and tired. Richard, I agree with you. I completely agree. I don't think you're making the point that you wanted to make there, but I agree. Our infrastructure is a disaster. I would much rather have had an infrastructure bill than a tax cut. And the difference is you cater to the base, which yells for tax cuts, instead of catering to the country. All right. Okay, well, I didn't realize it was 4:36, so we went on a little longer. Thank you for the comments. Sometimes that makes it a better back and forth. But listen, everybody, I'm sure everybody watching this is a voter, but make sure everybody gets out and vote. It's just what we do. It's hard to imagine that anybody didn't get a chance to take a look at a debate or see video or commercials or what have you of either of these candidates. Get out, vote the entire ticket. You know how I'm voting, but no matter which way you vote, look, it matters. What happens down ticket matters. Except for on Branford's ticket, we also have registrar of voters, which doesn't really matter because there's only 2 names on it and there's only 2 seats for that. So that won't really matter. But vote down ticket. Understand there are impacts to those positions, who you want to represent, not just our country, our president, but also our state in Washington and also our state representatives and state senator. And we'll be on tomorrow. But again, tomorrow's an easy day. So maybe we'll find a completely different topic to talk about for tomorrow at 4 o'clock. That said, guys, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. And we'll see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night.